All right, so I did notice those of you that were working and those of you that were not. So don't think just because I didn't say anything to you that I didn't notice that you did not have this paper on. All right, I just keep track of that. So when you ask me for like extensions on deadlines or like extra retake opportunities, I know who to give them to. All right, but number 4 and 5 were the ones I wanted you to focus on from your note sheet. All right, just to kind of refresh our memory for what we did yesterday. Yes, we still had a lesson yesterday, even though classes were only 20 minutes, because it's a pretty easy concept, especially when you do get to use Desmos to graph this stuff for you. All right, now for number 4, we were looking for how many solutions and what those solutions are. And we'll list them over here. How many solutions did you get when you put this into Desmos? We got 2 solutions, right? What are they? 2 and 8, that is correct. So if you don't know how we got that, I'll show you right now. But we got that from going to desmos.com. You have to log out. You just kind of like turn off your computer. And then once it turns back on, you're going to go to the apps and hit lockdown browser. All right. So I'll show you how to do that right now. So we're going to go to desmos.com. All right. Go on the graphing calculator. And we're going to enter it exactly how it looks like on our paper. So that was x squared minus 10x plus 16. All right, and there we have our graph. Again, we're looking for our number of solutions, our x values, our x-intercepts, your quadratic roots, whatever you want to call them. That's what we're looking for on here. So we are only concerned with the x-axis. So wherever this graph touches the x-axis are my solutions. So I have here and here where it touches, that's why there's 2 solutions. And since those values are 2 and 8 at those points, then those are my answers. All right, makes sense? Another thing that I want to show you is because, you have a worksheet that has tables and graphs on it. Another thing that I want to show you is how to use Desmos to fill in that table and graph. All right, because you do still have to fill those out, even though it's really easy to find the solutions this way. If that were to pop up on a test or something, or it's on your homework now, you do have to fill those out for the full points. So what you have to do is once you've graphed it, look for your vertex. So the highest or lowest point, whatever it is, figure out what coordinate is on that point. All right, so for this graph, for number 4, my vertex is 5, -9. So that's what I'm going to put in my table. All right, you have to make your table based off of the vertex. So 5, -9 is going to go in the middle of my table. And then I fill out the rest using my vertex. All right, so numbers before 5, like 4, 3, and 2. And then numbers after 5, like 6, 7, and 8. Because we want all the x values to be near the vertex, right? How can I fill in this y column? We can plug in the x's and just use our calculator and solve it. But what I want to show you that I haven't shown you yet, because I wanted you to get used to, using your calculator and stuff, is that you can also look at the graph that you made on Desmos. And since we have to figure out, what's the y value when x is 2 and 3 and 4 and all that, I can just go to Desmos, x is 2, what's my y value? 0. So that's what I'm going to put into my box. All right, I could just look at the line for these coordinates. So then going back to Desmos, when x is 3, so here's the 3 on the x-axis, I need to go either up or down until I reach my parabola. All right, so right about here, what's that y value on when x is 3? 3, -5, right? So that's going to be the next point in the table. Make sense? And while we're here, we'll just find when x is 4, what's the y value, if you can see from where you're at or on your own screen. All right, the y value is -8. So that's how you can use it to fill in your table. What was it was -5, right? Over here, right? And then it would look something like this. And then I would plot these points onto that graph. That's how I would get like the full points on a test, on my practice, even though I'm using Desmos to figure this out really easy. All right, makes sense? All right, so then when you did number 5, what did you get for your solutions? -3 and 3. So again, 2 solutions with number 5, and that parabola happens to cross at -3 and 3. All right, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and this is just a rough sketch, but like that's where your parabola would be, crossing the x-axis for number 5. All right, questions before we move on to discriminant? All right, so the last portion that we learned yesterday is called the discriminant. And this is, the way that I explain it is if you're like a more visual person, you probably really like this method of finding the x values, right? Because you just graph it, you look at it, and it's really easy. But if you're more like a left brain person, like you're good with numbers, then maybe this way would be helpful to you. All right, so we learned that the formula for the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. And if whatever value we get from using this formula is greater than 0, so it's positive, it's a positive number, there's going to be 2 solutions. If it's equal to 0, there's going to be 1 solution. And if it's less than 0, there's going to be no solutions. All right, so there is a bit of memorization with using this method, but you'll see why it's relevant, especially in the other lesson that we're doing today. If you're wondering where this A, B, and C come from, they come from standard form of quadratic functions. All right, so whatever my A, B, and C value are, I plug them into this formula and solve. So I had you guys do 8, 9, and 10. How many solutions did you get in number 8? 1 solution. So let's see if that's right. What's my A value in number 8? So for number 8, the A value is 1. The B value on number 8 is -3, and the C value is 10. All right. So being able to pick out the A, B, and C is the key thing here. All right, we're going to plug that into this formula. -3 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 10. All right, I'll use my calculator for that. I mean, I could do it by hand, but why why go through the trouble if you can just also use a calculator and get it right 100% of the time. All right, my only suggestion would be that if you're putting it in a calculator, make sure anytime you plug in a number that you put parentheses around it. All right, so I enter that into my calculator and I get negative 31, right? For number 8. So in what category does that fall into over here? Good, so it's actually 0 solutions for this one. All right, so fix that. It's 0 solutions because when I put that into my calculator, I got a negative 31. All right, questions about number 8? How many solutions did you get for number 9? How many solutions did you get for number 10? All right, those are correct. And I'll just show you what that looks like plugged in real quick. So for number 9, our B value is 10. So we have 10 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1 times C, which is 25. I think we get 100 minus 100, which is 0, which falls into this category, so 1 solution. For number 10, our B value is negative 4 minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is negative 3. Enter that all into your calculator, and we get 40. All right, and since 40 is greater than 0, that means there's 2 solutions. All right, any questions? All right, that's kind of like a warm up for what we're doing today. And I'm sorry, I'm going to apologize in advance because it is kind of like a lot of me talking today. Tomorrow you'll have more time to like work on the worksheets. So I'm not just trying to like throw a bunch of work at you. I do plan to give you time in class. All right, but if there's no questions on yesterday's lesson, then we'll move on. So looking at our new lesson, which is still about, how can I find the quadratic roots? Except the difference with this one is we're going to use something called the quadratic formula. All right. You'll see this again in geometry, in algebra 3-4. You'll see it in college. We did a ton of stuff with this in college. All right. I won't make you memorize the formula at this level, but you should know how to use it. So that's what we're going to go over today. All right, and it's kind of like what we did when we did like factoring, when we did it by graphing. There's some familiar parts in this. Question? It'll be after Carter. So there's some familiar parts in this, like this part right here. What does that look like? It looks like what we just did, right? So there's the discriminant, the part that tells you how many solutions there will be. Because in the quadratic formula, we're taking the square root of the discriminant. Well, if it's a positive number, there's going to be 2 solutions because there's always going to be a positive and a negative solution. But if it's 0, all right, square root of 0 is just 0. There's no positive 0 or negative 0. So, that's why there's only 1 solution if it's 0. And that's why there's no solution if this part is negative. Because you can't take a square root of a negative number. All right, at least not at this level. Does this other part over here, the negative b over 2a, does that look familiar at all? What does it look like, if you remember what it's called?
It looks like
when you have to find the axis of symmetry is what you're probably talking about. Yep. So it's kind of like putting both of these together. So there you go. But again, I'll provide this formula to you. You just have to know how to use it. So the first thing you need to do to use it is make sure that the quadratic function is in standard form and that it's equal to 0. So is this example in standard form and equal to 0? It is, right? So that meets this, and I'm just going to write this over here. All right, that's what we need it to look like, and it does. So step 1's already done. If it was not in this format, we've already done some examples about rearranging and stuff, but that's what you would have to do if it just wasn't already in that format. All right, so now we're on to step 2, which is to identify your A, B, and C. So for this example, what's my A value? My A value is 1. I'm going to write it over here. What's my B value? -5. And what's my C value? -36. All right, I'm going to plug that into this formula. And normally I'd write it like right next to it. I don't have a lot of room here. So just try to see like that I'm using this. So it's going to be x equal to -b, which b is -5. So I'm going to plug that in and I'm going to put parentheses around it. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So -5 squared. Minus 4, because that was already in the formula. Times a times c. All right, all of this divided by 2 times a, and we said a was 1. All right, so everybody see how we are just plugging this into that formula. All right, we're plugging this into that formula. One thing I will say is once you get a lot better at like coding, at like how to properly use a calculator, you could just type this all in and get an answer. But we're pretty new at coding, so we're gonna simplify certain parts. So I will simplify starting here. What happens with this double negative? It becomes a positive, so it's just going to be a +5. So x equals +5. Plus or minus, and I'm going to put this part, and I'll highlight it so you know what I'm talking about. We're going to put this part into Desmos. All right, because it gets a little tricky if you try to do it by hand. So I'm going to open up Desmos. And I'm going to put the square root of that exactly how it looks on my paper. So -5 squared minus 4 times a times c. All right. So using my calculator, I typed it in exactly how it looks, the square root part. When there's parentheses, because I plugged in some numbers, I plugged in a B, an A, and a C. I put those in parentheses. So if you leave one out, it does change your answer, right? So you need to have parentheses. All right, here's a little trick that you can use for that square root symbol. I know it's hard to find sometimes. You can just type in SQRT and it'll automatically pop up for you. All right, so if you type in SQRT, pops up, you can keep writing the rest of the problem. All right, any questions? So I'm going to get rid of that square root portion, the portion that I highlighted, and I'm just going to replace it with 13 because that's what it equals. All right, so going back to the notes. All right, we have 5 plus or minus 13. So that's what we got when we simplified this over here. All over 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, now that plus or minus, remember that symbol? Well, that means that we have 2 answers. Because the discriminant was positive, we have 2 answers. And it's going to be 5 plus 13 divided by 2 and 5 minus 13 divided by 2. So it's 2 separate problems. All right, so 5 plus 13 is 18, divided by 2 is 9. So my first x value is 9. Down here, 5 minus 13 is negative 8. And then divided by 2 is negative 4. All right, you can also put this in this one too. All right, but that's how I get my x values, using this formula. All right, maybe that's easier, maybe that's not easier for you, but, you know, that's another way. Any questions? You guys want to try one? No, you don't want to try one? All right, well, let's do an example where we do have to, like, do some rearranging. So, like, let's look at number 1 on this portion, and we'll do that together. All right, so follow the steps. Is number 1 in standard form and set equal to 0? All right, it is not in standard form set equal to 0. So what can I move in order to make it look more like this? Good, I can move the 20. And I'm actually going to put this on a different page because I know I'm going to use a lot of room. All right, this is number 1 on your paper. So I need to move the 20 by subtracting it. All right, that's how I get it to equal 0, which is what we want. We want it to look like this. And then whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. And then simplify or combine like terms. So it cancels out on the right. That's how we get it equal to 0. On the left side, can I combine anything? No, so I'm basically just rewriting it. So I just have x squared minus 8x minus 24. All right, now we need to figure out what our a, b, and c values are. So what's my a value? 1, good. So the number in front of the x squared is 1. What's the b value? Negative 8. And then what's the c value? Negative 20. All right, now on to step 3. We're just going to plug it into the formula. And solve. All right, so here's the formula again for reference. So I have a negative b, so negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 8 squared, minus 4ac, so minus 4 times 1 times negative 20. all of this over 2 times a, which is 1. All right, so everyone see how we are just plugging stuff in? Right? No confusion there. All right. So now we're just simplifying a little bit. We can still use a calculator for some of it. But what happens with the negative 8? Becomes a positive 8. Plus or minus, let's go ahead and put this into Desmos. So do your square root symbol. So SQRT, get a shortcut to that symbol. Put the parentheses, negative 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 20. Right? I would just say like double check, make sure it looks like it exactly how it looks on your paper. Because if you forget one sign, that'll change your answer. What did you get when you put this part into Desmos? Right here. 12. That sounds right. Anyone get something different? All right, well, if you got something different and you just don't want to speak up, you can ask me later because I'll show you what you're typing in wrong. All right, but this is what we have after simplifying a little bit. Now that plus or minus means that this is going to break into 2 separate problems. One where it's 8 plus 12 divided by 2, and one where it's 8 minus 12 divided by 2. That's how we get our 2 solutions. So over here, what's 8 plus 12? 20, and then divided by 2 is 10. So that's one of our x values. Over here, we have 8 minus 12. What's that? Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. All right, those are my 2 x values for that one on your note sheet. Any questions? Yes? You could write it like this. If you write it like this way or like this, that's fine. Technically, this way is more proper, but you know, it's not the end of the world. As long as you have both solutions there, that's fine. All right. Now, to kind of save you guys some work, we'll do the you try problem on your actual worksheet. So on the worksheet that you picked up today, you're going to try number 1 on your practice that you picked up for today for the quadratic formula. All right, so try that one. If you get stuck, let me know. If you get that one really fast, you try the next one. And then we'll go over it, so it kind of saves you some work. Yes, this is another. Notice that the quadratic formula is provided to you in this little corner, right? Because you need that in order to solve. All right, now looking at number 1, is that in standard form and is it set equal to 0? It is. So step 1's already done. It looks like that format that we need it to be, so no rearranging in number 1. In number 1, what's my A value? 1. What's my B value? And what's my C value? Now I need to take all those values and plug them into this formula and make sure, don't forget anything. Double, triple check it before you start simplifying. All right, but I have x equals negative b. So anytime I plug something in, I put it in parentheses. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So negative 2 in parentheses squared. Minus 4, don't forget that 4, it comes in the equation always. Times a times c. All right, all of this over 2 times a, which we said was 1. All right, so any questions on what we just did? Everyone see how we're just plugging stuff in? All right, now let's simplify some of it so that we can make it easier to solve. What happens with the negative 2? Becomes positive. And this portion, the square root portion, I can put that into Desmos, right? I could also solve it by hand, but Desmos will probably be easier and more correct. What did we get when we plugged that into Desmos? Good, it should be 14. If you did not get that, maybe you missed the negative sign. Maybe you missed a number. All right, but it should be 14. All over 2 times 1, which is 2. All right, now from here, because it's plus or minus, we have 2 solutions since this was positive, right? We are going to break this into 2 separate problems. One where it's 2 plus 14 divided by 2, and one where it is 2 minus 14 divided by 2. What's 2 plus 14? And then 16 divided by 2 is good. That's one of my answers. Down here, what's 2 minus 14? I think you're getting a little bit ahead. 2 minus 14 is negative 12, and then negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 9. All right. These are my x values. I can write them like this with the little fancy braces. All right. Any questions? All right, if you haven't already, keep working down this worksheet until you get stuck. We'll go over number 3 before you guys leave. All right, so try number 3. If you're beyond that, you already passed it. You know, keep trying. If you get stuck, I'll teach you how to do it real quick. Tomorrow we'll do more of like what to do when it's irrational. So like when it's the square root of 22, and 22 is not a perfect square. All right, we'll look at that tomorrow. Just try 3 for right now. So when you did number 3, were you able to just jump right into step 2, identify A, B, and C, or did you have to rearrange it? All right, you had to rearrange it because it's not in standard form set equal to 0. So what can I move to make it equal to 0? All right, right, focus, or else we won't be able to leave on time. All right, we do have to subtract 7. That's how we get it set equal to 0 on the right side. And then whatever I do on one side, I have to do to the other. So I have negative x squared plus 8x minus 7. What is my a value this time? A negative 1, good. B is positive 8, and C is negative 7. Plug it into your formula, which is at the top of your paper. All right, you guys are moving around too much. Keep moving around, I'll keep you a whole minute after. All right, focus on what's going on. All right, so plug it into the formula. It's minus b, so minus 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 8 squared, minus 4ac, so minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 7, all over 2 times a, so 2 times negative 1. All right, now we have negative 8 plus or minus what you get when you put this in decimals. All right, we do get 6, that sounds right. All over 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2. Now, I'll kind of do a shortcut to this. What's negative 8 plus 6? Negative 2. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is good. And then negative 8 minus 6 is negative 14 divided by negative 2 is good. So that's what you would have gotten if you did number 3 correctly. All right, questions, comments?